Hey everybody, welcome to this glorious Tuesday. Glorious in terms of weather, maybe not in other ways. Uh, Again, everything keeps evolving and we keep seeing how we have different experiences and as always, there are those who are working on the front lines that are experiencing a very vastly different world than us who are sitting at home. And from the collective's point, I think it's really important to kind of look at the ways that we're responding to everything should always come from a place of compassion, if at all possible. And if it's not compassion, it could be anger, right? And that anger is a form of energy that needs to be released. And I think that that's really important, that we recognize that we can transmute all of our emotions, as raw as they feel, into something that is solution-based and worthwhile. And I think that that's really important, that we all keep doing that in whatever way possible. Even if it's talking to someone for a half an hour because, maybe somebody might gain a different perspective and feel as if they can kind of pull out of a more, a frame of mind that is maybe depressed or anxious or fearful. So today we are going to do something a little bit different with the reading. And I am going to do a reading with the Crystal Mandala Oracle. And Oracle cards are different than traditional tarot cards because they don't follow any of the suits. They don't kind of do the major arcana and the minor arcana and all the different things, which is what I've done the last 2 days. But I thought it'd be interesting to get a different perspective. This particular Oracle deck is by one of my favorite authors named Alana Fairchild. And she has it's an interesting deck because it has basically messages from ascended masters, goddesses, and then I think also angels, something like that. But I like it because it has a vast kind of different perspective on the different things that are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a two-card drawing. And the drawing is, one is going to be, the two-card drawing is meant to kind of represent the masculine and the feminine aspects of who we are, kind of the duality of what we're experiencing right now. On the one hand, our families have become extremely important. And on the other hand, we're also being, put into more, difficult situations in terms of the actions that we're taking, things like that. So, the yin and yang, the two aspects that I'm talking about, traditionally the yin is a feminine energy, which is all about being, and it's all about the emotional plane and the emotional body and the most emotional aspect of what we're dealing with. It's also not action oriented, it's spherical, right? So it's about holding space. It's about feeling the way that you feel and then transmuting all the energy transmuting all the emotions that you're receiving and that you're experiencing, and turning, and it doesn't have to go anywhere, right? It doesn't have to it just is. It doesn't have to do something, right? So that's the feminine aspect, right, of the duality. And then on the masculine side, what we see is the yang, right, is directional, right? It's like, I'm going to do something. I'm going to be, it's very, very action oriented, and it's very directional. And so I think it's important for us to look at the two different aspects of what we're experiencing right now, because one of the things that I think that this period is calling for us to do is to become more balanced in those things. I know personally, being an executive and being a VP in a company, I am mostly in the directional. I'm mostly in the do, and then I come home and I have to kind of be in this more feminine aspect, right? This aspect that says I'm going to I'm going to be the mother to my children and the wife to my husband and all of these traditional things. And yet there is almost nothing in society that supports that to happen, right? To make that huge shift between I have to be one and then I have to be the other. And so sometimes you kind of fall in between the two. and it's hard to know, am I supposed to do something? Like, have you ever had that experience where someone's talking to you and they say, and you know, they're telling you about a difficult time that they're having, right? And they're, and really you're wanting to hold space for them, but then suddenly you flip into the yang, you flip into the masculine aspect, and you're like, I'm going to try and fix your problems. And I think that it's very important at this time that we recognize that we need to, you know, kind of be aware of where you are. Am I holding space for you because you're having a really hard time and I just want to be there and listen? Or am I actually doing the opposite, and I'm actually saying, okay, now's the time for solutions, right? Like we're in an action place where things like that. And a lot of people are feeling such raw emotions at this time that we're really needing to be in that more emotional feminine aspect in which we're just holding space for people and the emotions that they're feeling, right? Because there's so much power in that. There's so much energy that's locked up in anger. There's so much energy that's locked up in all these different things that if you're able to transmute that experience, then what comes out of that is action, right? What comes out of that experience of like, I'm so angry right now, I don't even know what to do. There's, you know, people are incompetent. There's so much injustice. There's so much, you know, all of these different things. Those emotions are incredibly important to feel, hold, and then transmute. And that goes by, maybe it's just expressing it. Maybe it's just like screaming, or maybe it's just telling somebody how you feel about something. You know, I think it's really, really important that we, you know, from the more etheric plane, that we recognize that, you know, harboring the emotion and really holding on to it in a way that feels like it's stuck. It feels just like energy that doesn't want to move through your body. I think that's something that we need to learn to process now. A lot of people process music. They process emotion by, there you go. They process emotion by playing music, going outdoors, exercising. The runner's high is a perfect example of that. The runner's high is you're getting to a place where your emotions are freely flowing through your body, right? And you're just like, you're feeling it, and they just go, and it's how it works, right? Have you ever noticed that, you know, whenever you're walking or running, you may just like trip up as soon as you think something bad, like you have like a negative thought or something like that? It's kind of similar to that in the sense that the system is working, right? You're processing emotions the same way you process your mental processes. Like you do the logical system, you also have the emotional aspect that needs to be an engine that runs, that gives you energy, right? That then you can move into that other space. So I'm going to do a reading, and one is going to be the feminine and one is going to be the masculine. All right, so the first I'm picking is the feminine, and then the second is the masculine. And like I said, a lot of people don't like the language feminine and masculine. They like yin and yang. You could say changing and unchanging. You could say directional and spherical. There's so many different things that you could say. And again, this is all very spiritual in the aspect of kind of what we're looking at. Okay, so the feminine that I got is called Grace for the Grand Gesture. And so it's interesting because grace is a term that's used in religion to basically mean that, you know, the grace of God is like this whole aspect of like grace, like you are beloved by God or you are favored by God. I know that there's probably a lot more, you know, there's probably scholars out there who could tell me a lot more about grace and its place in religion, but this card in particular, Grace for the Grand Gesture, what it is it, to me, it's very much speaks to where we need to have the feminine right now. The Grand Gesture is something that's like, I'm going to just do something so radical for myself and for others in the feminine space, right? In the space of like, I'm like, I'll give you an example. Grace for the Grand Gesture feels like right now, I'm supposed to be working, or right now I'm supposed to be taking care of my kids, and right now I'm supposed to be cooking dinner, and there is nothing inside of me that can do that right now, right? There's nothing inside of me that can continue with business as usual, and the Grand Gesture says that's not happening right now, right? And it could be something as simple as that. When I've experienced the grace for the grand gesture in the past, it's been something incredibly, it's often radical. Magic in its traditional form is obviously a whole bunch of things, but from my perspective, magic has always been about, I call it the miracle bitch, because it's kind of how it is sometimes, right? It's like, even if you don't want this right now, even if you don't want any part of your life radically changing and the lives of everyone around you radically changing, it's going to happen, because that's the magic. It's she's a bitch, man. And the reason I say that, and that how that relates to the grace for the grand gesture, is that, is that these things are all massive sea changes, right? They're all massive sea changes in our culture, within our own lives, all these different things. And so we have to allow the grace to let that happen and to let it transform within ourselves, right? So, whatever it feels like for you that gives you the space to give your feminine aspect, the aspect that doesn't want to go anywhere or do anything, or it just wants to be and experience emotions and transmute that experience for others and for yourself, like that's where that is. All right. And so now the masculine. Oh man. Okay. I always love how these always work out. So this one is unconditional trust. I'm not gonna lie. I listen to that, especially when it comes to the directional masculine aspect of things. And I want to say, I know I'm not alone in saying that unconditional trust for doing things right now, yeah. So what I think this means, my initial aspect of, like, when I first see this, my initial thought is, I don't have any unconditional trust for anybody to do anything other than a small group of people who are actually acting and doing change, enacting change within, that is directly addressing the things that are going on. And I think that what this actually speaks to is that, again, like I was saying at the beginning, this is about the feminine and masculine aspects that exist within us. Not necessarily, you can say it exists within a relationship, no matter if that relationship is same sex or binary or non-binary or whatever. The aspect of the two, the yin and the yang that come together, exists on the macro form between people, in the community form, in the global form, but then they exist within us. So I think, so what feels right to me is that unconditional trust is the trust within yourself to act in the appropriate manner, right? I think as long as you are giving yourself the space to be, as long as you are processing your emotions as they come through, you're not letting them get stuck in your system. It's like that feeling when you want to cry and it's like stuck in the back of your throat, like you're moving that through your body. You're not just allowing it to stagnate. That combined with this need to trust that once you've done that, then you can actually act. And from that place, you can act from a place of unconditional trust. So my husband is kinesthetic, right? He's a kinesthetic processor of emotions. For me, I'm auditory, for the most part, and a lot of my clairvoyance comes in that way. Yes, thank you, Beth. That's right. Our personal masculine side needs to own this unconditional trust in ourselves. That's right. So for me, I'm auditory. My husband is kinesthetic, which basically means that if he hears a piece of information, it takes him 2 to 3 days to actually be able to come up with an answer. And that answer that he comes up, though, is absolute truth. Like, it's his truth. It's run through his entire system. And when it comes out, you can completely trust that's exactly his truth. Like, it may not be any otherbody's truth, but it's his truth, right? So it's like, I usually, when we have a big decision to make, I tell him, and I'm like, I'll come back to you in 2 to 3 days and ask you how you feel about this. And when he comes back, he knows. He just knows exactly what it is, and I trust that he will stand behind that for everything, right? And right now, that's what we need to do with our masculine aspects. We need to make sure that we're processing our emotions. We're not coming from a place of anxiety or fear that is sitting stagnant in our body, that we've moved everything through. We've done the things necessary to process the emotions, and then we can go on this unconditional trust side, and we can know that we're acting from a place of balance and stability, right? Because nature always seeks balance, no matter what, on what level, whether it's the physical form, whether it's the mental form, emotional, all the different things that exist within nature is always going to act in a balanced nature. And if you're acting from an imbalanced place, if you're acting from a place of hate or anger or anxiety or fear or something like that, then you're not acting in a sustainable place, right? You need to be able to go that solid foundation, that solid footing of the balance between the trust, between the masculine and the feminine aspects, between being and doing, do, and then you're able to move forward. So I really like the reading for today, because I think in general the masculine and the feminine are, it's something that we're again being given an opportunity to foster within ourselves, right? When you're forced to stay still, when you're forced to be within yourself, when you can't go anywhere outside, you have to go somewhere inside. And going there inside means that sometimes it's a little bit harder than we would like to say. There's this wonderful children's book that I read to my children. It's called The Wonderful W. And it's a book about a princess who she lived in a kingdom in which no one really wanted to look inside themselves, and everyone was consistently distracted. And then one day the W's disappeared. And instead of having a hole, a W-H-O-L-E, instead you then had a bunch of holes, H-O-L-E. And these holes started forming everywhere, and the W's disappeared across the entire land. And eventually it came to the point where everyone felt as if they didn't know, they couldn't even remember a time when they felt whole, W-H-O-L-E. All they could see was the holes in their lives. And I think that, it wasn't until the princess decided to look inside herself to address her own hole that existed within her own chest. It was an H-O-L-E. It wasn't until she decided to dive deep down into her own into her own hole that existed within her, that she experienced all the emotions that she had locked away, that she had repressed, that she, had to basically face her inner darkness in whatever way was possible, right? She sat down, she did deep breaths, and she said, how do I make myself whole again, right? And so she faced the darkness. She faced how scared she was. She faced how anxious and fearful she was. She faced how angry she was at what her life had become, or what the kingdom had become, or all these different things. And once she came out of that, she emerged and she became whole, and all the W came back into her life. So she was, instead of having an H-O-L-E, a hole, she had a hole, she was whole. So she had W-H-O-L-E. And everyone else saw that she was whole, but they still had their own holes. They hadn't addressed it yet, but they did know that every time they went around her, that they felt better. They felt better about themselves. They felt better about everything that was going on, until finally one day they were forced to look inside themselves and say, I'm going to process my emotions. I'm going to become whole again, and I'm going to face any darkness that I have. And I really, and so eventually everyone did it, and everyone became whole again, and everyone was happy, and everyone was present. And, the distractions went away, the escapism went away. And that's a long story. That is literally a kid's book that I read to my kids, but it's a story that kind of serves as a map for our time, right? We have the ability to look within ourselves and really to become whole again, right? To stop looking outside for what makes us whole and start looking inside for that. So yeah, I'm really glad that that I'm seeing that in so many different people, right? I'm seeing, even if it's through media channels, you're seeing this seeking out of like, okay, I can't actually be fearful and anxious forever. I can't be all these different things forever. So how do I actually speak to my higher self? And how do I speak to the higher self in others that wants to be whole and is actually already whole, right? We drop down into the reality of doing so much that we forget to be. And this is really, I think, an important thing. I think it's wonderful how many people have joined today. Thank you so much for joining. If you are just joining, I will give you a slight description that I just to kind of give you 2 seconds, about 40. I guess my daughter's 5 now. About 5 years ago, after my daughter was born, I had a very kind of intense experience in which I started to recognize that I had intuitive abilities. And so now I kind of live this very interesting dual life in which I have, I'm, a vice president of a company on the one hand, in which I am a business person in every sense. And then on the other side, I kind of like to talk to people about their own intuitive nature, and also to give them any insights I can as to what is going on the subtle and kind of invisible landscape that I can see. And I think actually everybody can, to a certain extent. I think it's the magic that we haven't discovered, that hasn't been discovered by science yet. Just not to quote too much from a Marvel movie, but I think that's all that I have for you guys today. And I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, and I hope everyone does well. And good luck with everything.